This is Tuesday, February the 21st, 2023, and I guess I will ask Ms. Lobeck to please call roll.
Chair Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Brost,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano, Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Here.
All right, Colleen, Mr. Garitano is down here in Jefferson City. I think he's going to be trying to log into the meeting here shortly.
Okay,
His schedule has changed a little bit due to some things that came up for him at the last minute. So, just be on the lookout for him trying to log in maybe within the next few minutes.
okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So next item on the agenda would be approval of minutes from the last meeting. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding the minutes from the last meeting? Okay, I'll express my thanks to Councilmember Dodwell for chairing that meeting in my absence. Seeing as how there doesn't appear to be any questions on the minutes from the last meeting, and there's Mr. Garitano now. So seeing as how there doesn't appear to be any questions from the regarding the minutes from the last meeting, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Motion made by Councilmember Dodwell. Do I have a second? Second from Councilmember McCutcheon. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I will abstain since I did not have a chance to participate in the meeting.
I'll abstain.
Brost. Okay, Councilmember Brost abstains as well. Motion carries, minutes approved. That brings us to public comment. Ms. Lobeck, do we have anyone online to make comments?
I don't believe so.
Okay, I see Councilmember Hopper has joined us as well. Seeing as how there is no public comment, that brings us to discussion items. First of all, we will have an update on business changes and other business news within the city that will come from Mr. Lee. So Mr. Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair, appreciate that and hope you have safe travels. Just a couple things today. Did want to note that Fox Company Yoga, located at 16347 Main Street, actually officially opened on January 29th. We're working with them. The department's currently working with them to plan a ribbon cutting ceremony, but they want to make sure to get a sign up before getting that done. So that should be coming within while the warmer months come in as well. So we'll keep everybody updated there. Also, just wanted to note that Lucky Dog Central, located at 16917 Manchester Road, has officially begun their construction of their dog-friendly cafe. They are looking to reopen in May 2023. They've expanded, if you have seen the shop, they've expanded that space into the corresponding space that was closed off before. So they have a lot more room. It's shaping up to be a pretty cool development. A really interesting note here, the department spoke with Bill Green, the owner of Craft Eats and Drinks, a nice restaurant here in Wildwood. And Mr. Green had let the department know that they're actually changing the name of Craft along with their look, their menu, and the management of the organization in general, the restaurant in general. They're hoping to have that menu and the renovations done by April 2023, along with the grand opening, and the department will be working with them to have the city be a part of that grand opening as well. We do not know the name just yet. Mr. Green was kind of holding that back for now, but we will have the name of the new restaurant once he allows us to, disseminate that information. So good news on that front. Looking forward to seeing what they put together. I know they've already done quite a good job. I also did want to note that 38 businesses have completed the 2023 business survey. Numbers seems to be steadily climbing. We're hoping to get at least 50% of the businesses, which would be around 140 businesses, to complete it before closing, and then the department will put together a report for the committee and council. Just another note from the last meeting, I know it was brought up talking about potentially have a library branch in here in Wildwood. Did want to note that we've been coordinating with the CEO of St. Louis County Library, Kristen Sorth, We're going to potentially be meeting this week to discuss a potential library branch. So more info to come there. I'm just trying to get her schedule open a little bit to be able to sit down and talk about, what that would look like. And then lastly, just really pointing out that there hasn't been any new major closures since our last meeting. So the department's available at this time to answer any questions. Thanks.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Lee regarding his update? Okay, then that takes us on to an update from Mr. Lee regarding the marketing campaign. Very nice sort of overall overview that you've given us regarding your efforts to move this issue forward. I see you've gotten a couple of bids from 2 different companies, Division D and also Atomic Dust. And you are also requesting a little bit of additional time so that you can get yet a couple of additional bids, correct?
That is correct, Chair Ottenberg. Just want to get maybe 3 more solid marketing proposals so we have a true girth of knowledge and perspective for that. So yeah, we are requesting at this time to postpone till March.
Okay, so that was going to be my first question to you is, do you think you will have the information that you want by the next meeting that we have in March?
I strongly believe so. I think that, with unless something crazy happens and we're not having any interested parties, I do believe we'll have the bids ready for March to look through and make a decision.
Okay, so that being said, I would open this up to discussion. If anyone has any questions regarding the information that Mr. Lee has provided us so far. Questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions? Councilmember Dodwell.
Just real quickly, thank you for the work that's been done this far and the excellent summary that was put together on benefits versus cost, et cetera. So I think when we get the final bids in, we'll be able to have a good discussion, and we'll want to get your perspective on, so to speak, personalities of the organizations as well, and ones that you think would mesh well with our goals here in the city of Wildwood.
So I would second Councilmember Dodwell's comments. I think in the topic that's coming up next, where we talk about business signage, you've done a comparison there of the various ordinances within the different cities surrounding us. But when those additional bids come in for the marketing campaigns, I think we would all appreciate maybe some type of a chart or something of that sort, or a graph that shows advantages and disadvantages and pluses and minuses of the various bids. That would help us more easily wade through all the information.
That can definitely be done, and we'll definitely have that done once we get all the pieces in. And since I came from this kind of realm, it'll be pretty easy to put together those advantages and disadvantages as well. So we'll be sure to kind of clear that up and put it in a chart for you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from anyone before we leave the topic of the marketing campaign? Okay, that would bring us up to the next item for discussion, which is the business signage. Just a little overview for those of you who may not be aware of the topic. It did come up quite frequently at the economic forum that we held back in January. I know Councilmember Garitano and Councilmember Dodwell were both there, and they can attest to that fact, that that's one of the concerns that was raised quite often by various business owners within the city. And as a result, I talked with Mr. Lee afterwards, as did Mr. Garitano and Ms. Dodwell, regarding trying to collect some information regarding surrounding cities, review that information with respect to our current sign ordinance to see if we could come up with something that would, I guess what I'll call a compromise between the concerns of those who want to make no changes whatsoever to the current sign ordinance and, or I guess maybe to phrase it another way, where can we make some incremental changes that will make it easier for owners within the city to get a sign that they think will adequately help them advertise their business without disrupting the overall rural character that I know we all want to protect. So Mr. Lee, I'll go ahead and let you give us an update on the sign discussion.
So in this case, I went about this taking a look at two aspects of what occurred during the business forum. In that forum, there was pretty much two different approaches, if you will, that were coming at us. One was saying, hey, we need to have different limitations on our wall signage, which could refer to the network technology partners issue of not having a big enough sign for their facade, but also discussing the aspect of having temporary signage, which was brought up by a couple of the smaller businesses. I believe it was Equine Assisted Therapy, if I remember correctly. But looking at both of those items, we do have in place, the City of Wildwood has in place and has it on our under the on our website as well, that for temporary signage, you can definitely have that in Wildwood. You just have to get a permit for it. Specifically, it has to have a zoning authorization, and it only can be erected for, I believe it was 30 days throughout the year. But if you spread that out, that could definitely cover, a 2 or 3 events that you might have. So in this case specifically, the department decided to kind of take a look at that wall signage concerns that were brought up. That was the part where we thought we could maybe take a look and see what could happen. And just to kind of give a summary of what we looked at here. We pretty much provided a summary of the regulations that are currently in place in Wildwood, and then also took a look back at what Wildwood did back in 2006 and why we made the changes we did, to kind of give you a background on where we were for wall signage. And that's what we're speaking to in respects to wall signage in general. It used to be 5% of the total area was the only limitation when it comes to size. If we're looking at size here, obviously lighting and everything else can be a different matter altogether. But when we're talking about size, we used to allow a 5%, a ratio. That was changed. We actually brought in a very well-known individual that came, his name was Robert Gibbs, and he actually is a very well-known individual across the United States, designing smaller cities in the light of new urbanism. What that means is really just being able to have all the essential amenities within walking distance. And when you bring that aspect of organizing and zoning together, it really does kind of lead to having smaller signs to promote biking and walking throughout the community, which in our town center, we do hope that it is built out in a new urbanist way. So looking back there, we also found that when we provided a description of town and country, Eureka and Webster Groves, our sign policies are, at least for the size, are pretty similar. If you look at the 1 square foot for every linear foot of wall face that we have, that's what our current regulation states, along with the 24-inch height limit. You do find that is kind of in line. If you do the math, it actually is in line with about I believe I was calculating about 8% on average of a wall face. If you look at Eureka and Webster Groves, Eureka provides a 15% of their actual base, the face of the building, to be the size of the sign. And then Webster Groves provides a 10% for that. And they do not have any limitations on the height of the sign size, which obviously it has a height limit based off of that percentage, but it doesn't have something as specifically stated as Wildwood does. When it comes to town and country, though, they did actually show that there is a height limit for the medical, senior living, and office districts. They do put in a 24-inch height limit or a 36-inch height limit, depending on where that business is. If it's on one of the bigger interstates, it's allowed to have a little bit of a bigger sign. But that kind of plays into the argument, too, of Wildwood's not built off of, 270 or I-64, where they were looking at for some of these items. And we do try to, conform to that rural character that we all love here in Wildwood. So in the interest of that, I mean, my personal opinion, based off of doing some research and comparing, I do think that our current regulations are supporting new urbanism, and what we put in place in 2006, keeps that flag moving. That being said, if there was anything that we would maybe want to look at a little bit more in detail, is potentially just that 24-inch height limit. If you actually look at the NTP case, they were in the square footage bounds. They came in at the square footage at 46.1 square feet. The problem there was they wanted two signs, actually, of 44-inch height. That was the problem. That's 20 inches above what our regulations currently state. And with the 24-inch regulation, that does limit the actual size, going outwards too with, you can't create it as, let's just say it's not as based off a percentage anymore. Sorry, I kind of lost myself there, but overall, the main concern here is that we really don't want to change things too crazily here, because we do want to keep that sense of charm that Wildwood does put across. And we do want to make sure that, we're keeping in what we've been doing over the past, since 2006. We haven't really given any variance over this cause. We've kind of kept strong with saying that, hey, we're not going to be, letting you have above 24 inches or bigger than that 50 square feet. And then also, if there is any changes, and I'm more than happy to hear everybody's input here, every committee member's input. But if we were to want to change something or recommend a change, that would have to be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So just wanted to give a heads up there where this would go. But more than happy to answer any questions at this time about the comparative analysis and what things I noticed in the regulations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So opening it up for discussion, does anyone have any comments, questions, suggestions for Mr. Lee or how we should proceed? Councilmember Dodwell.
I know I seem to be the only one that ever asks questions on this committee, but having been in this conversation, I guess part of the issue is with the process that the city runs through, planning and zoning or the signage committee. I'm not sure which one got back to the owner of this particular business with nothing more than, no, you can't do this. In your research, was planning and zoning or anybody on staff willing to work with a particular business and help them identify how they can fix their sign to meet the requirements? And
so to answer that, thank you, Councilmember Dodwell. In that case, how it works is you actually submit an application to the city, and we have our, it all goes through our director of planning, and they have been very, very forthcoming with businesses. Usually how the process goes with myself is they let me know once a application comes in for any kind of commercial signage, which I can kind of stay on top of, make sure it moves, and Mr. Bunich does a great job at this too. But we're able to then look at, is this sign in compliance? And they look at it, and they actually, I've seen multiple occasions where they sit the individual down and say, here are the notes. They say what needs to be fixed. And most of the time they take those notes back to the sign company that has worked with us, and they get it down to spec. The particular case with NTP, they were applying for a variance because they wanted two signs that were a little bit larger in this case. So getting it down to regulation would make it so they would have to have that sign be 24 inches tall. And they were pretty much saying that in that case, it would be too small for the facade that's available at that property. So there was really no way to, for them at least, I mean, they definitely worked with the city quite a bit. And I know our planning department worked with them to try to get them down to spec. But unfortunately, I think that they just came to the conclusion that they need that sign to be that certain height, which was where the variance request came in.
And when we look at, say, the Schnuck sign or the Deerberg signage on the fronts of their buildings, can you explain to me why they get to have all that space on their buildings when somebody across the street from them in the same type of intersection, busy business area, can't do that? I
can take that under advisement and look into that a little bit further. I just don't want to answer on that and have the wrong answer. I appreciate that. Yeah, no problem. But I believe that those signs were, those buildings were created before 2006. So I think that might play a role into it, but I don't know for sure. I would love to, break it down with our director of planning so I can get a little bit more facts for you, but I can follow up with an email about that.
So, Mr. Lee,
thank you.
I'm sorry, Ms. Dodwell, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Mr. Lee, would you, it appears based on what I read through that the 24-inch maximum height is probably the biggest stumbling block in the minds of many of the people who were at our meeting. Would you concur with that?
I would definitely concur. If there, and the thing is too, if you look at, across other cities as well, on top of the ones that we're looking at just in this review, a lot of them didn't really have a problem with they didn't have any regulations on the height given. It was more so just doing a percentage, but some also do the actual linear size of the, doing the exact same comparison that we had. But when it comes to, yeah, I would just say in short answer, I do agree that that would probably be the biggest concern when I'm talking to businesses, is that they, if they have a bigger lot or a bigger property, that's been a concern that they've shown.
So if the 24-inch maximum height were removed from our sign ordinance, they would still have to stay within the percentage of the square footage of the facade for their sign. So that would still be a restraint on the size of the sign. That would allow them a sign that would be more in keeping with the size of the frontal facade that's facing the street. And then the sign application permit or the permit for a sign would still have to spell out the exact sign dimensions, that sort of thing. So there would still be an opportunity to review this before it would be approved, correct?
That is correct. And in this case, with the one square foot you get per linear foot of wall face, and that you get up to 2, it accommodates up to 2 if you actually have if you're on the main arterial roadways within the city of Wildwood. So it does get a little bit bigger with a 50 square foot maximum size. When you take those into consideration, the only thing that I would say that could be a little blurry in that case, say we got rid of the 24-inch minimum for the signs and the height, you could get some signs that are a little bit too long, and you could get signs that come in a little bit too tall, and you wouldn't have any regulation in place. Even if they were to submit it to us, we could obviously suggest, the city could suggest, hey, this does look a little bit long for the building facade that you're currently, operating out of. But in that case, there's nothing on the books that would say we could restrict them from putting that sign up. And that was something that we found, that there was really just a ton of interpretation with this 5% ratio. We were getting a lot of applications prior to 2006 that a sign would come in, it would be far too tall for the building that it was going on, or far too long, and it just wasn't really standardized across the board. And the thing that the 24-inch, there needs to be some kind of height limit, I believe, in place. But the main piece there is that, do we increase that a little bit to accommodate, or do we keep it the same? But at the end of the day, it standardizes signs across the city. And you can notice that our signs all do look like they're uniform. And that's something that they were definitely thinking of when putting together these regulations in 2006.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hopper.
So I guess I have a couple of questions about that. I mean, or I guess a comment and then a little bit of a question. So I guess my comment is, the first comment is, great, our signs all look very similar, but doesn't do any good if businesses don't come here because they can't put a sign up. The other is, I mean, I guess my understanding is there's still a review process. So if we don't have a height limit, so I guess what I'm kind of getting to is, when we say it's a little bit too long for the facade, or if it's a little bit too tall for the facade, we got to be able to boil that down to, what does that mean? Does it mean it can't be taller than the facade? Does it need to be at least 6 inches below the top of the facade? Like, I think when you're talking regulations, I think it makes more sense to do something like that than just to have a flat, it can only be this tall. Because yeah, you got different types of buildings, different styles, and different lot sizes. They can throw all of that off, and I could be a company and get a huge building, like, great, here's my 24-inch tall sign for this massive building that I have. I think it just doesn't make sense. I think it does put like almost an arbitrary restriction on signs, just for the case of saying like, oh, well, now we can make this easy and uniform. Well, easy doesn't always work the best. And I think maybe putting a little bit back on, let's just actually review this and see if these signs make sense. But if we're going to have restrictions, I think they have to make sense. And I think they have to be, defined, and not just like, well, this is a little bit too big,
No, I definitely agree with you in that case, Councilmember Hopper. And like I said, too, I think that, if there was something that we would want to, if we were to want to change something, that would be the one piece would be maybe increasing that size of the height limit, not necessarily getting rid of it. So it does maintain some structure of, standardization across the city, but also that, like you were just saying, Councilmember Hopper, what might be interesting is looking into, instead of limiting the actual height of the lettering or the logo, maybe we look into where that sign can be located within the facade, like you said, like 6 inches below the top, 6 inches above the door frame, something like that, where it's actually the location versus the actual size of the lettering itself. And I can look into that further too, because I do think that there are a lot of regulations on the books with other cities and even ours that kind of keeps it in certain areas. But maybe that is enough to keep it from, like we were talking about, a little bit vague, being too tall or too long, fitting in those parameters.
And Councilmember McCutcheon, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, I apologize. My hand raised doesn't seem to be working.
Not a problem.
I can remember the discussion, and there was a lot of thought and, professional input put into this discussion about how many complaints are we getting because of the size of the signs?
As of right now, Councilmember McCutcheon, I would say obviously in that meeting, we had 2 distinct businesses. Anthology of Wildwood said that their visibility from 100 could be better. And then NTP had mentioned it during that meeting. The other mentions were about the actual, temporary signage piece that we discussed. But I would say that overall, when I'm talking to businesses, they aren't really, I haven't heard anybody that's too upset with it. But usually NTP, I think, is an interesting case, because if you look at that building, it's different than the majority of the businesses that we have, because you look at if you're in the Dearborg's Town Center over there, a lot of that is right there on retail in a commercial lot that fits that sign that we've designed, the 24-inch height and under 50 square feet. It fits in there better. Whereas you get something that's a little bit more kind of an oddball with the building on the side where NTP is located, it doesn't fit as well because it's actually a bigger facade. So I would say when I'm talking to businesses, that's not their main concern. They're not bringing that into my attention. But when we discuss it, they do. I have had a couple businesses just, say, oh, yeah, we could have it was a little bit of a process getting it put up. But once they had it up, I don't think the size has been too big of a concern, other than the 2 individuals that were at the meeting.
Well, in my personal opinion, I don't think for just a couple of, businesses, we should go ahead and change our regulations. I don't see anything in, delving into it more and, giving it some more thought and some more research. But for just, 2 businesses, and then we change our whole, guidelines and how it fits in with the city of Wildwood and the real character of the city. Personally, I don't think it should be changed for just 2 individuals. Maybe a range might be better given the size of the building, or you may have some exceptions for the range if there's an exceptionally, larger building. I remember we put in monument signs for the businesses that were located like in, is it Wildwood Crossing, where the one Schnucks is in? We put that monument out in front with several business locations on there, all being the same size, so they would get some more notice besides just the signs on the buildings. So that might be something to think about as well.
It's an excellent point, Councilmember McCutcheon. Just wanted to point that out too, because back in 2006 too, what the city was able to do along with providing these standard regulations for signs across the city, they also added in sandwich board signs, projection signs, and arm and post signs on top of those things. So when I do talk to a business, and with NTP specifically, their property right now would accommodate a monument sign based off the information for that site specific plan. But that's something that they could maybe look into, is other options other than just wall signage, which was one of the things that I found while doing this research, was that, as long as you provide a couple different avenues, it actually can create just as much visibility, but having, kind of different ways to connect to the consumer that might be walking. And if you look at how we zoned and how we had a lot of our buildings created, it was kind of built in this new urbanist, viewpoint of having, shorter, not as much parking lots and things to obscure the view of the actual property itself. A lot of the times you have it right off the main street, or you're going into, say, Dearborg's Town Center, and it's right there to the left of you or the right of you if you're not in the middle of that parking lot. So, I mean, it is, with the amount of complaints I've received, it was definitely a hot topic at the forum, but that has been where it really popped up. It wasn't something that I have conversations with on a daily basis with businesses that I talk with. Thank you.
So, Mr. Lee, Councilmember McCutcheon may have a point here, and I guess I would ask you, based on your recollection of the comments that came in regarding signs at the economic forum we held in January, was there more concern over the height of the signs that would be mounted on the frontal facade, or was there more concern expressed over temporary signage that businesses may want to utilize when they first open up? Because we did hear several comments on that topic as well.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that it started with NTP, Network Technology Partners, bringing up the height of the signage. And then Anthology piggybacked off that argument with the same thing, saying visibility. But after that, I believe it was 3 other businesses that got into the nitty gritty of temporary signage, which we currently already have regulations in place to permit them to put that up as long as they are in good standing with the city and they apply for the permit. So I do think that it was it definitely shifted. You know, once we started talking about temporary signage, that's where the conversation definitely directed.
Okay. All right, very good. And what are you looking for from this committee on the sign tonight?
The department's recommending tabling the matter for now, maybe looking into it a little further later. But if the committee would like, as mentioned, if they would like to make a recommendation in general, any changes that would be made would need to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review.
Okay. Councilmember Dodwell.
I'm sorry. Did we not at the meeting, though, indicate to folks that we would send back the outcome of our research on this? And I don't know how we want to share that with all the businesses in attendance, or if we just want to report it out when we have our next meeting in April, or what you would like to do.
Thank you, Councilmember Dodwell. I do think that in this case, sending the research out, we could maybe do both. We could send it out via email saying, hey, we looked into it, here's a comparison, and here's what we found. And I think definitely highlighting the changes we made in 06 and why we made those changes would be important as well. But also having a small little blip within the next business forum, just stating that we did look into the issue, and we took a look at, other cities and what they currently have in place. I think that we could do both. That would be fine for me anyways.
Okay,
So,
yeah, just take the
I'm sorry, go ahead.
report. Just take the report you have and share it.
So Councilmember Garitano, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You've had some experience talking with businesses in Ward 8 and some of their experiences with trying to use temporary signage in the past when they first opened up their businesses. Any particular input or observations you'd like to make on this topic? Sorry, Joe, we can't hear you.
All right, I'm going to try, and hopefully the background noise isn't that bad, but it's a bit noisy where I am. So what I could share is that we had a business in the Dearborg Shopping Center several years ago, and they had reached out to me because they would put out a temporary sign on the sort of the island when you drive into the Dearborg Shopping Center, sort of like a kind of like a regular basic sign that you can stick in the grass. But they said that they were upset with our regulations and they felt that we were not business friendly. And when the sign was there, they said it made a difference to remind people that you could stop by there and pick something up. And so they wanted some flexibility with getting that to be out there more than what the city would allow. The most recent, which has been discussed at the Board of Adjustment, was regarding the Lucky Dog Central. They had a request with Board of Adjustment because they had the man that was in a costume and they brought to the Board of Adjustment. It was, to me, I think it was very impactful. They showed a line graph that demonstrated their business results. And when they were told that they could no longer have that gentleman in the dog costume, their business results did drop and I believe, in my opinion, significantly. So they were looking for some additional flexibility too. I think that people get that we don't want to have a permanent option, but I think in their case, what they were looking for is more flexibility because they were trying to get their business up off the ground. So, I think in their case, they found a workaround, and then they had a mannequin with the costume in the parking lot. So basically, but I don't know if it was the same result or not. But anyway, that's the feedback I can share from two examples regarding those temporary signage rules.
Thank you, Councilmember Garitano. Councilmember Brost, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious. If I look at the participants on the meeting tonight, it doesn't show that there's any Wildwood businesses. Do they get any notification of this meeting? I was just curious because it would seem like we would at least have a few. So I don't know if Mr. Lee has that answer, but I'm just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Prost. If Mr. Chair Ottenberg's permission, we'd love to speak to that.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes, we do. We send those notifications out quite frequently, for each meeting actually. And during the business forum that we held in January, we pointed out the kind of different communication channels, one of which was showing up for public input for the Economic Development Committee, but also going to City Council directly and speaking at the public comment section there as well. So we do keep businesses in the loop in that regard. We do send out pretty much an email with my email list that I have put together. Along with that too, with the Wildwood Business Survey, there is a specific question that says, hey, check these items that are potentially challenging your business at this moment. And signage is one of the answer choices that is available. So I do believe once we get enough businesses to say that we've got enough for the business survey, I think that'll be a good surefire sign if we need to kind of relook into this and see if we need more info. But just to give you a heads up, we definitely reached out to the business community and let them know that this was on the docket, considering last month's meeting. That was definitely that transpired. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess also just to maybe get input as to the time of this meeting. To me, being a business owner, I think this would not have been a bad time, but that's just my opinion. Just because I think, we're here to try to help the businesses. And so whatever we can do to get them more engaged, to help us help them, you might say. So, okay, thank you.
So
thank you.
I'm going to put Councilmember Garitano on the spot again here, since his ward has many businesses in it. Do you think the issue with temporary signage is more the current sign ordinance, or is it maybe that many of the businesses just don't really know what the current ordinance is?
I think that's a tough one to answer because there probably is a little bit of both. I think some get the information and the impression ahead of time knowing that, and that may be sometimes why we hear the feedback that we're difficult to work with. But maybe Tom could answer that more since he talks with them.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would definitely say the communication of what our signage regulations. We have a really nifty guide to actually have a copy of it here, but it's a guide to Wildwood sign regulations that's put in place. It takes it kind of out of the context of just our ordinance in general. It's laid out more in layman terms and has picture descriptives as well for all of our different types of signage. I do think that's a very helpful resource that can be found on our website. I do think that the communication aspect of kind of as Councilmember Garitano was saying, that we kind of get a bad rap out there. I do believe that some people, do believe that, but it might be, in this case, just a couple individuals that have particular, circumstances that would need a little bit more of a big sign, or maybe a little bit of a longer sign in some cases, for visibility purposes. And I think those are the main things to look at is, okay, how many of these individuals are actually coming across the table? And we haven't had too many of those since I've started back in June of 2022.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee. There's a couple of different things that we've talked about regarding this issue, and I think one was Councilmember Dodwell's suggestion that we take the information we've gathered so far, and that enables us to at least provide an update out to those who attended the economic forum, because what we want to do is demonstrate that we're taking their concerns seriously and show that we're making some progress in at least reviewing the issue. This does not necessarily mean that since we're just sending out this update now, that we're done examining this issue, but we can at least let them know that, yes, we've taken your concerns seriously and we're looking at the current ordinance. Then the other two parts of this would be the height, the 24-inch height, and what we need to do with that. I guess I'll take some direction here from the rest of the members of this committee on how we should address that particular issue, or should we try to do anything with it at this point in time? Or should we wait and defer action until maybe Mr. Lee has a chance to gather some more information from his business survey? Any thoughts on that? Let's keep that, Mr. Hopper.
I mean, I think, I just think it still bears some discussion and looking into, I guess, just for me. I think a couple of things is, are we going to change a sign ordinance and all of a sudden we're going to have a line of businesses wanting to come in Wildwood? Probably not. But, the business community tends to talk. So if you have one business that comes here and they have a hard time, it only takes a couple people that have a hard time working in Wildwood to a reputation to go around and start talking about how hard it is to work with Wildwood and make a business. And then you have people who don't even try because they're like, oh God, I know such and such with MPT and they had an awful time with their sign. So I don't want to go. I'm not even going to bother looking at Wildwood. And again, I think it's and a lot of it's my personal opinion, but I just feel like it seems like that regulation is just something that even if one person was frustrated with it, I think it bears us looking into it to determine whether or not that actually makes sense, or if there's another way of we can look at it. I know it was reviewed in 2006, but life and times change. So if we just continue to do everything the way that we did it because we reviewed it one time, then nothing would change and we'd be in real bad shape. So I just think it works. I think it's worth looking into both the height, but also even just our temporary sign regulations. I think just reviewing those and seeing if there's places where we can find flexibility, even if it's in the review process, to make sure that we have good means to work with businesses and allow them some leeway in our review process and appeal process to make sure that they're getting a fair consideration of whether they really do have an extenuating circumstance that would benefit their business and it would make more sense than just, we like to keep a country aesthetic and at the detriment of businesses for 2 seconds,
Okay. All right. Thank you. A couple of other hands up here. First, Councilmember McCutcheon, who will be followed by Councilmember Jaxie. Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what's meant by that we're difficult to work with. I mean, is it they don't understand the process to follow, or they don't agree with our ordinance? I mean, what does that exactly mean that they think we're difficult to work with?
Mr. Lee, do you want to answer that? You talk to more businesses than probably any of us.
Of course, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. When they say difficult to work with us, I would say that I hear that a little bit more from the developer community when I'm reaching out for larger scale projects. They pretty much say that just because we have certain areas of town centers zoned in one way, and right now with the development community across the nation, they're all looking to build a lot of multifamily housing and a lot of a lot of senior living developments too. And when you say, hey, you know, we have that zoned for, and this is more in the planning department's wheelhouse, but when we have this zone for, you know, retail or restaurant, something like that, they tend to think that, you know, we need to have a little bit more flexibility in that area for, you know, potentially changing some of the ways that our certain lots are zoned. But then on top of that, when it comes to more of the small time businesses, it's, you know, a good example would be the Lucky Dog Central situation. I mean, they've been nothing but very supportive of the city, but they did express to me that whenever they did have to take out the individual that was wearing the dog costume, they did see sales drop off pretty drastically after that occurred. So just looking into, you know, when maybe a good way to, and I noticed this while we were talking, a lot of this could maybe help if we focus in on, you know, either new businesses that are coming in or businesses that are trying to get their feet off the ground, a way to maybe, you know, make it more flexible, but also get them through the process quicker so they can get their signs up as soon as possible and get maybe a different avenue and let them know. And like I have been doing is letting them know about all the different sign options that they could potentially have at their location. So that's the main thing, is just continuing the communication piece, but also maybe looking into that and saying, okay, well, how can we make this process easier for a new business or a business that's already been here that might want to change up their sign or logo.
Thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
Hey, first off, real quick, thank you very much for the report this evening. I thought that was good information. I did have a question though, that makes me wonder if maybe we're chasing our tail. And by that, what I mean is maybe a question to ask the other cities is, how many complaints do they get from their businesses reference their sign regulations? In other words, are we just chasing our tail higher? Is there really an issue here? Or is this just part of the normal, you know, doing business as a city? Not everyone's going to be happy all the time, right? And so maybe a question to be asked, and I think it would be much more difficult to quantify, obviously, but how frequently are you guys fielding questions related to your signage regulations, et cetera? Thanks.
So Councilmember Jackson, I think that's a very good point. I might suggest that what we do is maybe table this discussion until next month. In the meantime, Mr. Lee, besides sending an update out regarding some of the discussions we've had so far and some of the information that he's gathered, that can be sent out to the business community. And then maybe you can also utilize your contacts with some of the people in the other cities to find out what they hear from some of their business owners regarding their sign ordinances. I got to thinking about Councilmember Jackson's comment. Makes a good point that probably no matter what our sign ordinance is, there's going to be someone that's going to be dissatisfied with it. So probably some more research is in order here before we propose any changes.
If you don't mind me speaking, Chair Attenberg, thank you. I would like to just say that's a really excellent point. I'd be more than happy to contact the cities that both in this review, but also other cities throughout the St. Louis area, just to kind of see, like you said, I know it's a hard number to quantify, but at least get their general understanding from either their planning director or city administrator of, you know, how many questions are they fielding in this regard and how many variance requests are they getting potentially, would be an interesting thing to look at. But I do also see that, you know, with new businesses, especially a business that, you know, maybe you have, it's your first brick and mortar shop that you put up. Some of those businesses don't understand that, you know, there's a lot more steps than meets the eye, and then getting a sign permit might have a couple more. It could be a little bit of a dragging, time-consuming process when you've gotten your occupancy permit, you've got your business license, and you've done quite a few other things. And when it finally comes time to open, you have to then apply for a signage permit. I think that sometimes can just, you know, lead into some frustration with some new business owners, because they're, you know, obviously opening any business is very stressful. So I do think that could play the role into it. So maybe how do we, obviously talking with other cities too, see how they're experiencing the same ordeal, but really looking at how do we make this a simpler experience for new businesses coming in?
All right, super. Councilmember Hopper, your hand is up. Maybe that was up from the last time.
Yep, sorry, I didn't, guys. I didn't get it clicked. It's fine.
Nope, not a problem. All right. Well then, and unless anyone else on the committee has any other comments, I guess the direction of Mr. Lee will be to do some more research, get his update out to the business community, talk to his counterparts in some of the surrounding cities and see what they're experiencing from their business owners, to bring that information back to this committee for our March meeting. Okay, very good. Next, that brings us to the Wildwood Business Forum schedule. Mr. Lee, you've proposed some dates for the meetings to take place throughout the rest of this year. And I'm assuming that what you would be looking for would be a motion from this committee to go ahead and publish the dates of those meetings. Is that correct?
That is correct. Approving the said meeting dates and times, and then also getting the promotional material out there, a motion to get that out.
Okay. Before we go to that motion, does anyone have any questions or comments regarding the dates of the meetings or the number of meetings, anything of that sort? Okay, that being the case, then I would entertain a motion that we approve Councilmember Bartoni. Motion made. Councilmember Brost, second. All those in favor of the dates as published by Mr. Lee, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us down to several items you had under the not ready for action category. Any comments there? Mr. Lee?
No comments on that, on right there. We'll have a better understanding definitely with the guide. Once we get this business survey in, that's going to guide a lot of that guide in general. So just wanted to make that note there, but no other statements at this time. Still looking into the home-based business exposition on whether to do it on the same day as the farmer's market. So we'll get more info to you. Still talking to a couple businesses and what they want to do.
All right, thank you. That brings us up to item number 6. Next meeting of the Economic Development Committee will be March 28th at 6 p.m. So any other questions, comments, suggestions, or concerns for this committee prior to moving on to item number 7, which would be to ask for a motion to adjourn? Councilmember Hopper. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, second, please. Councilmember Dodwell. It is non-debatable. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We will see you in March.